Hello, our wonderful listeners. Just a quick heads up that today's episode is a deep dive with experts from businesses that provide services around women's health. This conversation takes a closer look at women's wellness because taking care of ourselves is key to how we show up as leaders, entrepreneurs, and individuals. We'll be discussing topics related to women's health, including mentions of body parts and other terms that may not be suitable for younger listeners. If you're listening around kids or in a public space, you may want to use headphones. This conversation is meant to inform and empower, but it's not medical advice. So please check with a healthcare professional for anything specific to you. Welcome to Begin, Build, Blossom Your Business Journey, the podcast where we share valuable insights, resources, and motivation to fuel your entrepreneurial spirit. Let's build a supportive community together. Don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts and be part of this journey. Let's pause for a moment to hear from our sponsors. You've built a name for yourself through hard work and dedication, but does managing the business side feel like a distraction from your true passion? Are you dealing with unmanaged finances? CME Accounting LLC is here to help. We specialize in organizing your financial records, allowing you to focus on what you do best. With organized books, you'll have more time for what inspires you, whether that's expanding your influence, building relationships, or simply enjoying life. Don't let unmanaged finances hold you back. Reach out to CME Accounting LLC today and let us help you thrive. Visit our website www.cmeaccountingllc.com or email us at admin@cmeaccountingllc.com. All right, let's jump back into our conversation. Good day and welcome to another episode of our podcast, Begin, Build, Blossom. Today's episode is dedicated to a conversation by and about women. We're recording at the end of October, such an important month for women around the world. It includes observances like International Day of the Girl, International Day of Rural Women, Menopause Awareness Month, and National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, among others. It's a time to reflect, to honor, and to talk about what wellness and advocacy look like for us across different stages of life. Now, while Begin Build Blossom is centered around the entrepreneurial journey, we know that how we care for ourselves directly impacts how we show up as leaders, creators, and business owners. Wellness, balance, and self-advocacy aren't separate from business. They're what sustain it. And what makes today's conversation even more special is that all of our guests are not only experts in their fields, but also entrepreneurs and members of our very own Begin, Build, Blossom community. They've each joined us before to share their business journeys, and now they're back to help us take a deeper dive into women's wellness across the decades. We'll be focusing on the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and beyond. We'll be talking about care, advocacy, and healing through different life stages and how those experiences shape our lives. Joining me are three incredible women who bring so much heart and knowledge to this conversation. Shanita Joy Murray, a registered nurse and doula, providing perinatal and transitional support. Secondly, we have Naa Adoley Pappoe, infertility and maternal mental health specialist. And then thirdly, we have Janice Leonard-Garcia, a licensed professional counselor and sex therapist. Their full bios will be in the episode notes, but for now, let's welcome Shanita, Naa, and Janice back to Begin, Build, Blossom. Welcome, ladies. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for saying yes and for joining us for this very important conversation.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So we're going to get started with two questions and then we'll move into the different stages we talk about 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s together plus. Okay, so this is addressed to all of you, but you can decide whether to answer or not before we move on. Can you tell us one early sign or shift you wish more women paid attention to, whether physical, emotional, relational, or sexual?
This is something that I have been speaking about quite a bit.
And it is the notion that periods in of themselves, the way they're designed, are not meant to be painful. So some discomfort, yes, but if you've got periods that cause you debilitating pain, you should be speaking with a GYN. Something is off. And as Black women, Black and brown women, a lot can be off. They tend to chuck it to dysmenorrhea. And sometimes that's what it is. Oftentimes they need to take a deeper dive. It could be a fibroid issue. It could be endometriosis. It could be adenomyosis. And so my point is, if you have period pain that's debilitating, you should be speaking to someone, and not just speaking to them, right? Forcefully letting people understand that something does not feel right and you need to take a second look at you.
I agree. And to piggyback off of that, for me, the shift that I think more women need to pay attention to, and it would really, I would say the onus would be more so on the mom, let's say, but we know families are different. So it could be a dad, it could be a grandma, whomever. When menarche starts, onset of the first period, we need to be having conversations with our young girls. Personally, took this out. I use this with my clients. Explained to my 13-year-old exactly what was happening inside her body. Now, some people might not go that deep, and that's fine, but I'm an anatomy and physiology girl, so we're going to talk about all the things. But first and foremost, she keeps a diary of her cycle, and that's easy to do. Those apps are on the phone. And she tracks her cycle, and because of how it kind of in the first year can be very be here or there, maybe have one, not have another one. It's very important to just gather that baseline information, and I think that is really the shift that sets the tone for all other shifts.
So I could speak to, of course, the body image coming into ourselves, like you mentioned, and I like that you made that point. A lot of some of how our identity and all that is shaped is our family of origin, how they talk about bodies, how they treat us. During puberty, we start to see a bit of a disconnect sometimes with mom and daughters, or daughters and the whole family, because you get the Caribbean, you think you're grown, like there are lots of comments that are made about your budding breasts and things like that could make a girl feel very insecure. And I think some of that can lead into teenagehood, into early adolescence, and all of that. And I don't know that for a lot of us, some of these insecurities ever go away. And I think that shows up a lot in the things we allow in our early relationships in our 20s. I think, of course, we will make some mistakes, but a lot of mistakes could have been avoided if we had people who truly centered us in our development. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much on that, but I do think our family of origin does shape a lot of that. And to have support outside of the home sometimes could be helpful, like school counselors or our godmothers, people who we can trust. I think that could be a good support for us if we don't have that at home.
And all those are such great points. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thinking back on that, how do you think women can begin building a care team early, even before having to deal with any crisis?
Getting comfortable with seeing a GYN. A GYN visit doesn't have to be because you're sexually active, because you are, suspecting an STD, or because you're pregnant, whatever the case may be. I believe that that's something, and I saw a GYN, a Black female GYN. She was on Instagram just speaking about how she invites young ladies who start their cycles into her office just to get comfortable having a conversation with a GYN. Speaking about hygiene, having sex positive conversations. Everything can be framed so negatively, but having sex positive conversations with young ladies and just getting them comfortable building the rapport. For people who are medical practitioners, the rapport is so necessary to be able to get to those underlying things that really can make or break whatever's going on with the client.
Yeah, I second that. I think that one of the most crucial patient medical practitioner relationships any woman is going to have will be with her GYN. And so starting really early and trying, right? Because if I'm to use myself, I wore them the way I wear my clothes. Like you try it. If it don't fit, you move to the next one. You know, there's a number of them, and you need to make sure, because of the nature of the conversation, because of the nature of the relationship, you need to make sure that you're comfortable. You're comfortable enough opening up your legs, just as comfortably able to speak. And Shanita made a very important point. That rapport that you build, that rapport that you pour into, the relationship that you spend time building can pay off. It's an investment, right? So when they're familiar with your voice, when they're familiar with sitting in space with you, when they get to know you as a person, not just a chart number, a lot moves a lot differently. I sit here today with a child earth side because I treated that relationship like I do relationships that are important to me, to the point where this woman was able to be a partner and an advocate for me. And I have a daughter now. Anybody else? And I think I'd probably still be struggling. So I just wanted to hammer on that point. I think it's one of the most crucial relationships, or one of the most important relationships a woman will have, is with her GYN, and she needs to pour into it just like she pours into everything else.
Yeah, yeah. So I support that, that relationship with your GYN, and I would encourage lots of physicians and clinicians to create an atmosphere where we can talk about early periods. Because what I'm seeing for a lot of our young ladies, the first time they go in is usually if there's a sexually transmitted disease, maybe in the late teens when they're exploring, or when they're ready for their first pap smear. Like, I have a client right now that I'm coaching through how to prepare for her first pap smear, and she's in her 20s, early 20s. So I do think a lot of these early experiences, maybe going in just for talks. But I do know, like, there is a stigma, because I remember going, I must have been maybe 18, 19. I had an ingrown hair, and I was so afraid to go in because I was afraid of what she would say, or what the nurse would say, or what they would assume has happened. So I do think there's a stigma when you're a teen, when you go in. What could it be for if it's not birth control or an STD and things like that? So I do wish that we can break that cycle, especially in the Caribbean. I'm sure maybe in the US, people are approaching these conversations differently. But I do know there are lots of barriers to that where I'm from. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm listening to all of you. I'm remembering my first encounter with a GYN, and it was literally after my first sexual encounter. I figured, oh my gosh, now I need to go see somebody just to check. So I wish I had heard this conversation back then, because I would have known that I could go in even before that. You need to build those relationships from early on. So that takes us now to our 20s. Let's move to that first stage we talked about. Here we will focus on foundations, awareness, and identity. And Janice, the first question here is for you. What patterns around sex, communication, and intimacy begin in the 20s that affect later relationships?
Yeah. So, of course, our 20s is where we do a lot of our our work. Not our work, actually. That's where we make a lot of our mistakes. Our 30s is when we go back and we try to correct it. But once again, family of origin plays a big role. There are conversations that are never had. The 20s, there's a lot of looking to our peers, looking to our peer relationships, really, for advice and, what are we doing? Everyone's almost like maybe doing the same things. So that is our greatest influence, our friends. The thing with that is our friends don't always have the best information. They don't have the best support. So we're maybe following the footsteps of people who are making mistakes, and we're also making those same mistakes. So what I would hope for in our 20s is more guidance on sexual health. But once again, there's stigma, like, why am I having sex? If you're religious, no one wants to talk about that before marriage, right? So there are those barriers that keep people more secretive and private about what they're exploring. So I wish our churches would have some conversation besides the waiting for marriage, besides the abstinence, because we know that is not everybody's story. And I wish we would accept that. But there is that barrier there. So from a sexual health perspective, of course, we always want to focus on teaching consent. We do see that when women are exploring in their 20s, their pleasure is not even about them. It's about pleasing their partners, pleasing the man, having the type of sex the man wants to have. For a lot of people, they don't experience orgasms until like later on. So I would say consent is something that we want to talk about, like what kind of sex or experiences you're saying yes to, making sure people have languages to speak around consent, um, non-exploitative, right? So making sure that there are not power dynamics there. So you're not doing things that you don't want to do. You're not being forced to participate in things you don't want to participate in. The other one is honesty. So definitely having relationships that are rooted on honesty and safety, shared values, of course. A lot of us are not looking to be pregnant early, but sometimes it happens. So making sure that if we are engaging, we're using protection, we're taking necessary precautions so that we are safe from STDs, but also safe from unwanted pregnancies, if that is not what we're going for. Of course, prevention of STDs as well. I am still coaching women into how to ask their partners to do STD tests and how to read them and how to exchange those tests. I think that is still taboo. But I do think having the language to even say, hey, I know our relationship is moving forward. We might want to explore with sex, but let's do tests first. Let's see how we're doing. And that is a struggle for a lot of people. I think you might not believe how hard that is for people that conversation is to come to for a lot of people. And coming back to pleasure, I think, of course, the 20s, we're learning a lot about our bodies, especially if we felt disconnected from our bodies. So there's not a lot of how you want to be touched, how you want to make love, how you want to make out. Like, there's not a lot of that. There's a lot of just going with the flow. So I think that could be a space, whether you're having sex or not. We like to say, find resources that are helping you develop those skills for when you get there, right? There's no point in, I feel like, being abstinent and not doing any work around your sexual health if the goal eventually is to build families and to have a pleasurable sex life. So I do think that we need to have resources and support for that, for when we get there. So those are my top things for the 20s.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to point out too, when we talk about partners, it's I know we mentioned men, but there are women who also have women
Yeah,
partners. So we
partners
want
as
to
well.
just keep that in mind. And now, how do early stresses or life experiences influence future fertility and emotional wellness?
I'll preempt by saying that we're in a space in time where there's this big shift, right? So women in their 20s today and over the last number of years aren't really thinking in terms of get married, settle down. Like, we're still in school, we're still chasing the money bag, we're trying to, people are trying to figure out their careers, and all of this stuff is happening in the 20s. And so, there really isn't much attention to fertility. I know that there are people who have babies in their 20s, but the majority have shifted, right? There's just this mass shift from coming to motherhood in our 20s. I will say that in the 20s today and over the last several years, women are forming like the foundation of how they're relating or how we're relating to our bodies, stress, and even like our overall sense of womanhood. So like early life stresses like instability, school, people are still in school, people are in college. So like high academic or financial pressure, or having or not having the emotional safety growing up. Like there's also this shift, but that shit's happening today. Those of us who came up in African household and Caribbean households, we know, and even I think like some of our African American counterparts can relate to this, like not blatant overall lack of, but emotional safety is this big thing millennial parents are shifting towards, right? So how can we shape our bodies and minds to respond to stress later on? This is the time that we should be thinking about that stuff. When your body tends to live in like a constant state of stress or survival, it can influence your reproductivity. It definitely influences your reproductive hormones, cortisol, estrogen, your overall menstrual health. So beyond the physical, there are, well, those early experiences also teach us how we cope, whether we're pushing through, numbing out, or we're tending to ourselves. So I often tend to remind young women that fertility isn't just about, it's not just about the, Shanita, is it anatomy or is it biology, like the eggs and the ovaries? It's about your emotional wellness as well, right? We're learning that all these things are intricately connected. So how safe the body feels, how safe you feel within your body. So learning to rest early on, learning to set boundaries, to manage stress early on. This is a skill that serve you in the long term, right? These are all forms of fertility care long before many women even start thinking about conception and like family planning. So little shifts in your emotional wellness can serve you or will actually serve you in the long term. If you ask like what are some ways that you can protect your fertility and like your emotional wellness, I would say prioritizing regulation over hustle, right? Where the body can't create life when it's constantly in survival mode. We're learning a lot about what cortisol, which is a stress hormone, does in our bodies. Like over time, there are the short-term effects, but there are also like the long-term effects. Build in small daily practices that can calm your nervous system. Starting that early on actually helps. Whether that's like breath work, something as simple as journaling, taking a walk, right? Learning to rest without guilt. This is something that's big with me, teaching a lot of people, walking through, talking through, guiding that self-care is not selfish. It is actually something that it's mind body work, mind, body, and spirit work. And regulation overall or in the long term is reproductive care. Get curious about your story. Janice touched on some of that. Reflect on how your early life experiences have shaped the way you handle stress, your relationships, your self-worth. This is another really big thing. Janice spoke about that a little earlier. Heal your emotional wounds. So healing emotional wounds is another big thing, whether through therapy, mentorship, talking to a big sister, or just self-awareness, awareness. And then the third thing that I will say that they can, women in their 20s can do to protect their fertility and emotional wellness would be to redefine what wellness looks like to them. Right? It's not about perfection. It's about balance. So just being kind to your body, starting small, setting boundaries, nourishing yourself. We were speaking a little about this right before we started filming, right? The big moves, the little changes that Shanita's incorporating in her life now, all of these things come together. At the end of the day, they help your body. They promote emotional wellness, which then promotes reproductive care.
Talking about reproductive care, Shanita, what early conversations should women have with providers about their cycles and reproductive wellness, even if they're not considering pregnancy right now?
Oh, I'm going to pick up where I left off, just talking about the cycle tracking. How I mentioned that you need to be doing that from the beginning of the first cycle. And so once you start keeping this diary of what's going on with your cycles, it's easier to pinpoint symptomatology. And there's a bunch of apps that can help you do this. For me at 40, I'm tracking everything right down to what I read that day. Did I nap? Did I have a glass of wine? I go into a lot of detail now, particularly because I'm on the perimenopause end. But just looking at symptomatology, how it changes, what part of the cycle do these things happen? And that's very important. And as Naa said earlier, I'm so glad she mentioned it because everything is just chalked up to dysmenorrhea. But we really shouldn't be having very heavy periods. We shouldn't be having periods that last really long or even really short. We shouldn't be having periods that are starting really dark brown or very dark colored. We should be having red colored periods. We know that, or maybe some of us don't know, but the cycle that we are experiencing gives us information on like the past couple of months or so. So it's an indication as to what has been going on in our body for longer than we're even aware of. And so paying attention to those changes it's going to be something that's very beneficial and really could clue you to certain things that your provider might not even pick up on because it could be subclinical in the sense of it might not show up on labs. Symptoms are as valuable as labs. They're as valuable as labs. So that's really important. I believe conversations around STD testing. What does a full panel look like? Everybody thinks that they're going for an annual checkup. and that the doctor is doing a full STD panel on them just because they went to their primary. Absolutely not. You have to request that. And that's something that you should know, like what do those tests look like? You know, that involves oral swabs, that involves blood work, that involves vaginal and anal swabs. 9 times out of 10, if you ask the average person, have they had all of that done? They're looking at you like, oh my gosh, I didn't know all of that, was a part of it. I would also say we need to be paying attention to breast changes, monthly self breast exam. I went for my first mammogram on Monday, and I was so excited to turn 40, first of all. And I was so excited about this mammogram because, like, oh my gosh, like this is a big deal. I'm proud that I was taught by my mom, who was also a nurse. And I really do believe she was such a pioneer of a woman because we had these conversations and she didn't always have the language to really say, she wasn't saying perimenopause. She was saying like, oh girl, I'm going through this slow early change, but now that I know it was perimenopause, I'm so grateful to have had a mom that modeled confidence and was very open about these things and made me feel comfortable to come and share these things with her. And so she talked to me a lot about, mammograms and these kinds of things. And when I was ready to go, I was just happy to be able to be in a place where I wasn't coming from a place of fear. Thankfully, I got my results back and it came back negative, but we need to start doing those self exams at home because, again, you can diagnose and feel a lump sometimes before a provider can catch it on a mammogram. And if you don't know your family history, you're not getting a mammogram until 40. We really need to be aware of family history because the person whose mom or aunt or somebody close to them who had, let's say, a malignancy at 25, they need to be being mammogrammed at 25. So 40 is the benchmark, so they say, but it is also very specific to whomever that person is and what their history is. And I would also say fertility clinics and banking eggs and these kinds of things, just having a hot take on what your fertility is, having those numbers and understanding what that looks like. Because for my clientele, we are in an age where I'm having a lot of clients who are single moms by choice. I'm having clients who are waiting till an older age and maybe have a partner, but they still want to be able to use younger eggs. So fun fact, you get your eggs when you are between 20 and 22 weeks gestation in your mother's womb. So when people do all this old egg talk, it's really annoying because realistically speaking, everybody's eggs are scrambled. So it is what it is. And so we know that the societal context does not allow for us to have babies at 15, 16. When you get that first cycle, that's the prime time. Those are prime eggs. Realistically speaking, that's insane. So having that context and just starting to have even fertility conversations. Maybe it's not something that you want to do right then and there, but it is good to know where you stand and maybe know what the ovarian reserve is and just get some information to guide, let's say, nutritional practices and things that you could be doing to speak to what Naa was saying, to be bringing down your chances of having any issues with infertility.
Thank you so much. And I'm listening to you talk about your mom as well. Remember the conversations I had with my mom. So when I had my first period, I was not shocked. I had my pads already set up. I had everything set up, and I don't think everybody gets that. So when you said that, that just came to mind. I'm so glad that my mom had those open discussions with me, and she prepared me for this. All right. So to bring all of this together before we move on to the 30s, I'm just going to rapid segment here. The biggest disconnect between what women are told are a priority in their 20s compared to what really matters from your perspective.
So I can speak to, of course, I know you'll cover the other parts, but I want to speak to relationships because I do see a lot of women who are now later in the midlife and now learning a lot of healthy relationship skills. What I see is for a lot of the women that I serve, they are on top of their career, they're crushing it. But when it comes to relationships, it almost seems like they are still in a very infantile stage there, just for lack of a better way to describe that, where they're just learning like very basic skills like discernment, how to date, questions to ask. Like there are lots of that I think that sometimes we miss when we are not balanced in our 20s. And I'm not saying I think it's great that we have a lot of career-driven women, but it almost seems like we put relationship on the back seats. And then we're going through sort of experiences that would have gone through in our teens and early 20s at the age of, late 40s, 50s. So I think that is something that I would love to see more women engaging in relationships, learning about yourself, your limits, your boundaries, all of those things early on, and how you want to date, how you want to be desired, how you want to show up for your pleasure. I think all of those things are so important to learn while you're pursuing your career. So yeah, that is something that I see very often in my work.
Let's say safe sex practices around understanding your fertile window. That is a big thing that a lot of women do not have a good handle on. Myself, like I said, my mom was very forthcoming about these things, but she wasn't a women's health girly. She used to always tease me about my interest in OB and be like, I was so not interested in that area of nursing. So for me, I'm a little more in depth in that. And I do speak to particularly my older girls about fertile windows and things of that nature because again, at that age, women are having babies older now. And there's nothing wrong with if having children in your 20s, if that's what you so choose. But my first child I delivered at 18, and that was not my plan. So with that being said, I wish I did have a better handle on what is a fertile window. Plan B is a very popular thing out on the market now. And we have these young ladies popping Plan Bs like candy corn. You're not even in your fertile window. You don't need to take it, so that understanding of follicular phase, luteal phase, when are you ovulating, tracking cervical mucus and understanding those things. And then just understanding again, paying attention to that cycle and what information is it giving you.
I mean, I'm gonna just pull also from what Shanita was saying before, what she said now, and just what Janice said. Like in our 20s, it's our experimentation. Like no one really is expecting today that the 20-year-old is settling down or is thinking these really big thoughts about where she is within her person, where she is within society. She's in 20s. She's going to college. She's living her best life. She's experimenting. She's got the boyfriend. It's serious now because she's not a teenager and they're probably having sex and all of this other stuff. But if you pull from the conversation that we had, all of these things matter. I think that people need to shift focus a bit and pay attention to some, if not all of the stuff that we've already mentioned, right? Janice was talking about these skills. Like this is, if you're going to experiment with these skills, like this is your play area. This is where you get to flex these relationships, these tools, these skill sets that you're going to need when you're in this forever relationship, right? Like discernment, learning to, what do you like? Who do you like? What's ideal for you? And then also stuff like what Shanita is talking about, just understanding yourself within yourself, right? Physically, she's addressing the physical bits. And I will say also just, this would be the prime time to start taking stock, I mentioned journaling before. Just write down everything. If you need a brain dump, just brain dump. As you go through page by page, who you are, what you like, what your interests are, what you're spending a lot more time on, you'll start to see it. It will be like someone is flashing a torchlight on it. You'll actually be able to start to notice trends. Incorporating some wellness. Yes, live your best life. Okay. Go out, get drunk, piss drunk if that's what you want. But you also need to start to build wellness skills, right? Because this body that you got is not going to be 20 forever. And soon you'll be 30 and things will start breaking down. Like it's here that you need to start to set yourself up for the next few decades of your life, building these relationships. Start now so that by the time you are done with college and you done chase the bag and all of this good stuff and you want to settle down, you have a firm, solid foundation with a provider, a set of providers who listen when you speak. So when you say, my heart doesn't feel right? Or my period seems a bit off, they're listening because you have actually invested time in those relationships. And I would say also, finally, if a family is in the cards for you, and I don't care if this is in your 30s or in your late 20s or as you approach 40, there are certain things that once you start having a period, like Shanita said, you need to start paying attention to. There's certain conversations that you need to start having. I did not hear anything about ovarian reserves and all of that good stuff. This is a blood test. They will pull a blood and tell you in a minute. They don't got to go between your legs. So you know what you're working with. Some people might need to freeze eggs, right? And the sooner the better. Like most people are having to, and it becomes pressure. It becomes even more stress when you have to make this split second decision because now your window is really short. You're 35 and you got 8 months to make a decision whether or not you want to have a baby today. So just prioritizing your fun, right? But also prioritizing yourself within yourself, physically and mentally, is also sexually it's also really important.
Let's pause for a moment to hear from our sponsors. You've built a name for yourself through hard work and dedication, but does managing the business side feel like a distraction from your true passion? Are you dealing with unmanaged finances? CME Accounting LLC is here to help. We specialize in organizing your financial records, allowing you to focus on what you do best. With organized books, you'll have more time for what inspires you. Whether that's expanding your influence, building relationships, or simply enjoying life. Don't let unmanaged finances hold you back. Reach out to CME Accounting LLC today and let us help you thrive. Visit our website www.cmeaccountingllc.com or email us at admin@cmeaccountingllc.com. All right, let's jump back into our conversation. Thank you so much. And you mentioned the 30s. So this is what we're going to go to next. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about fertility planning, body and alignment. We've touched on this a little bit, but let's just see how much more we can bring up here. So now I'll go back to you. How do you support women through the uncertainty of fertility and identity? And we're focusing on women in their 30s here.
So in our 30s, fertility, we played all our games, right? Most of us are now thinking, the biological clock, like the thing we forgot about in our 20s are the biological clock. Shanita said a lot more women are coming into motherhood as by themselves, like single moms by choice. So at this point, depending on where you are in your 30s, you're not even checking for if there's a partner, if there's some women are making the decision to go into motherhood by themselves, right? Because the biological clock, our fertility and our identity become so deeply intertwined where they were like almost separate while we were chilling in our 20s. Now there's this like fusion. And for many women, this is also the decade of pregnancy, right? This is the decade of postpartum. This is the decade of learning to live with fertility changes. As a fertility and maternal mental health specialist, my work is centered around helping women navigate not only the biological uncertainty of fertility, but also the emotional shifts that come with it. I can speak for days on end about my own experiences. And I want to point out that for me, culture plays a very big part. I know that Janice had mentioned before, but there are narratives that get filtered through our really from early on. Once we hit puberty, while we're in our 20s, there's certain narratives that we keep hearing that also form parts of our identity, and we don't even realize it, right? So whether someone is trying to conceive or they're newly postpartum or they're just reimagining what life will look like, what motherhood looks like for them, the common thread is identity. Like this is the phase in our life or the decade where we're shifting into who am I? Right? Like, who am I now? Who am I if things don't go as planned? For many of us, many Black women, many women who are of African descent, many women who are from the Caribbean, our worth, whether we want to admit it or not, is tied into motherhood, intricately tied, right? The one thing you're put on this earth to do as a woman is make kids. And so this is something that a lot of us are struggling with, especially those who have some challenges along the way. We talk a lot about body and mind alignment in my work. It means literally listening to your body signal. Fatigue is telling you something. Anxiety is telling you something else. Loss of joy, Shanita Joy, loss of joy is telling you something else. They're messages, right? They're not failures. They're not labels. They're messages. And so it's paying attention to what the body is saying, what the body is signaling. The body and the mind, they're in constant conversation. And when stress grief, trauma, when they go unaddressed, they can affect both your emotional balance and especially your reproductive health. There's support clients around helping people slow down, helping people reconnect with their bodies, and really giving them the language so they're able to identify their emotions appropriately or accurately. And that might just look like, again, guided journaling, mindfulness, or just simply learning to ask for help without guilt. This is something that a lot of people, it's something that I'm still struggling with. Maternal mental health, I want to shift just a bit. It's also about normalizing that messy middle, right? The waiting, the trying, the healing, the conception, the moments when you love your child, but miss your old self. I know a lot of people, I spend a lot of time talking about grieving that life that you had, because no matter what you do, even if God forbid your child or children pass away, you're never going to go back to who you were prior. There are some biological shifts that occur that you got no power to shift back. So grieving that loss of self, like spend the time. There's nothing stupid about it. There's nothing silly about it. Grieving the loss, if it comes up for you, and even if it doesn't, spending some time in acknowledging and in honoring how your life has shifted, right? Our 30s invites us to honor all of that complexity. So when we're supporting emotional wellness through fertility and motherhood, we're not just improving outcomes, we are helping women reclaim safety in their bodies, clarity in their identity, and compassion for their own evolving stories.
Thank you. Oh gosh, I'm listening and I'm thinking
About your
I yeah, I'm thinking of myself here. I turned 40 this year, so I just left my 30s, and all of this is so relatable.
Yeah.
Goodness, I wish I had this conversation myself back then.
But we didn't want to hear it. We didn't care about that. And that's the thing, like hindsight, right? We don't want to hear that.
Shanita, how do you balance clinical knowledge and emotional support for clients before they conceive, during pregnancy, and or postpartum?
For me, the clinical hat of being a nurse, that never leaves the room, right? Nursing school is such a rigorous training and such a changing of thought processes that, like, I could be in the grocery store assessing people and not even be doing it on purpose. So there's always a component of assessment, but I am so glad that I had the privilege of having older nurses train me and teach me the importance of seeing the client as a person. I will never forget Patricia Walpert. She was an amazing, amazing professor. And she always, always, always had us look at the person for a person. Before we even were able to touch a patient, we had to understand the backstory. We had to build the nurse patient rapport. That was very, very important. So for me, I want to foster an atmosphere where my clients are comfortable speaking to me because, again, I feel like medicine is collaborative. It's a situation where what you tell me and what you experience is just as valid as what I know and the skills that I possess, being able to do certain things related to medical skills. And I often say, you could teach a monkey how to do some of the stuff that I know how to do. Put in a catheter, put in an IV line. But that one-on-one experience where you are really bringing both of those things together, that is where I think the magic lies. It's very important to be able to listen. So in preconception, and I wish more people would see me preconception, but my suggestions are always labs. What are your baseline labs? A lot of times, especially around the realm of preeclampsia, we know that is a big hot topic in pregnancy. We don't know our baseline blood pressure. We don't know what our baseline liver function is. What are baseline platelets? All these measures based on protein. We don't know what any of these things are. So we really don't know where true just essential hypertensions and pathology exist and where a superimposed situation comes in. And that's really challenging to be discovering all of that during your pregnancy, which is something that pretty much was going on with me. And some of the experiences that I had. Fortunately, I didn't have full-blown preeclampsia, but I did end up being an essential hypertensive. So I wish that I did have more of that baseline information in the beginning. I would also say just provider alignment again. And I'm so glad that Naa spoke to the revolving door of, yes, you can fire a provider. I'm also glad that there are TV shows now that are teaching us that we are consumers. So a lot of these shows are showing us that, yes, you have the right. Just like you book a consultation with me as your doula and you ask me 11 questions, I want you to do the same thing to your provider. Because much less, that's the person that's going to be delivering your baby. So you need to be vetting them in the same way. And if at some point the alignment is still not there, they need to go. So I think just understanding that, also understanding that who you have your first feminine hygiene conversation with and who does your first pap smear does not have to deliver your baby. The lens that you are going to them for in that case has nothing to do with delivery. That person could very well have the highest C-section rate. You don't care about that at 18. But now at 35, when you're ready to deliver this baby and you don't want to have a C-section, that's a totally different story. So just having that understanding, nutrition, of course, we talk about preparing the body for, getting pregnant, decreasing inflammatory foods and increasing good fats and increasing protein and all these things. Moving into pregnancy, we are continuing to try to keep nutrition where it needs to be, movement, exercise, those kinds of things. We also want to focus on just education. What are these stages of pregnancy that we're going through? Symptom management. I hate when my clients come to me and tell me, hey, I'm having this symptom, morning sickness. And my doctor just gave me Unisom and they gave me B6 and blah, blah, blah. How much protein are you eating? I eat a lot of carbs. That's why you're nauseous. It started off an issue with your placenta putting out all these hormones. You get nauseous. You don't eat. Your blood sugar is low. You eat something that's going to spike your blood sugar again. You're not eating any protein. You're not doing anything to stabilize the blood sugar. Insulin resistance is something that we come into contact with when we enter our 30s as women, and it is a huge, huge, huge impactor to fertility, perimenopause, our cycles, when we start getting the little chin hairs and all that good stuff, and the hormonal acne. All of these things are a sign of that. So it's really important to pay attention to that, to be educated as to what is the process of this labor, what is this going to look like, how do we pull in the partner, dad, whomever this person is that's the partner, how do we rope them in. I talk a lot about breastfeeding because that's also something that I see that is very like a source of stress for a lot of moms, and postpartum. What is your postpartum going to look like? We're talking about that during pregnancy. Who's bringing the meals? Who's coming over to help with laundry, dishes, all these kinds of things? Do you have a person that you have designated that you can say, hey, if things get rocky and I start to feel like I'm going beyond baby blues, I need to be able to call Naa and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. These things should be identified prior so that when they come up, you're able to kind of just shift right into what you have. And then through postpartum, I think it's also just that continuation of processing the birth, of course, helping with, breastfeeding and these kind of things. Because like I said, that is a huge source of stress for a lot of women. Nutrition is a big issue during postpartum as well, because a lot of moms lack appetite, I'm seeing. So that's another thing where we're kind of working with that. So I am constantly assessing where I can throw in my clinical knowledge. Of course, if there are any red flags, I'm going to point them out. I'm not going to tell you like, hey, this is a red flag and freak you out, but things that this needs to be escalated to your provider, teaching you what those things are, what they look like. And then also finding areas to commend you, right? Where the emotional support comes in, finding areas to commend you where I've had clients that have said, hey, you know what? I didn't like the way this doctor acted and I decided that I'm going to go to a different practice. That's a commendable thing. I didn't have to tell you to do that. You knew that you weren't aligned and you moved from that place. And in that point, you're advocating for your child. And when I tell you that that's what you did, you're now going to be more likely to continue to do that. So the balance is really, sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 50-50. It's meeting people where they're at. I think that's very important.
Thank you so much. You ladies are giving us a lot to think about. Janice, as we move on, let's how can couples navigate intimacy changes? And that's during fertility journeys, pregnancy, and postpartum.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Of course, loaded. So I'll try to, condense it as much as I can. But we start with the health of the relationship. And sometimes it means peeling back the onions, the health of the individuals in the relationship. What I like to start with is values clarification. Coming into our 30s, we're becoming more of our whole full selves without the influence of And yeah, we do have some influence in our families, but now we're almost seen like the real adults, right? At this point. So a lot of values clarification, what matters to you, what, just the things that are important to you and also the things that are important for your relationship to work. So a lot of what we do a lot of pre-assessments. So looking at how the couple aligns in their faith, spirituality, how they talk about finances, how they do conflict, communication, their habits, their wellness habits, all of the things. I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. There's all of that we assess to see how the couple aligns, how they deal with issues, and their own conversations around sex. So a lot of that we recommend both of them doing their health assessments, right? So sometimes we think it's the women who has the issues. I think that is something that is often assumed. So we do recommend doing visits together. As much as we're doing our egg quality test, we do highly recommend the men doing the semen test so we can understand where we're starting from, what do we need, what nutrition habits need to be changed, wellness habits, lifestyle habits. All of those things are becoming more under the microscope as we become, serious about fertility. Throughout the process, I like to recommend that my clients, they do a lot together in terms of visits, scheduling sex. That is sometimes where sex becomes more of we have to do it on this day, right? The cycle tracking, being more aware of, we have this window, and we have to optimize, right? That window. So it can be beautiful, but it can also be stressful. I've seen people in that stage where it becomes really stressful. They become disconnected with their bodies, right? So we do recommend intentionality. How are we having sex? What are some new things we're trying and doing? Like, how do we add some novelty and spice to the process of baby making? Because it can become more of a ritual thing. Like, we have to do this, and get it done. But it can also be fun. Also, there's grief that comes with that. Of course, we see women who have navigated miscarriages. So there's we try to bring in the partner as much as we can. We do know that some partners can feel disconnected in this stage, seeing that we call it ambiguous loss, where it is something somewhat intangible, but you know that it was there. So there seems to be a disconnect with a lot of partners with that. But I think doing a lot of the psycho ed truly helps them support each other in that space. So that's kind of what the fertility stage would look like. The pregnancy, of course, being hands-on, doing the visits together, understanding anatomy. I still feel like a lot of people struggle with anatomy and basic biology. So understanding all of that could be truly helpful. Some of the things that I did and that I recommend to my clients, just staying active. I did a lot of prenatal yoga, a lot of walking. We did the birthing class, the sibling class, the hospital tours, the birth planning, all of those things that, can support the couple as they're going through this transition. Of course, we do know that the mother-child bonding stage can almost feel like a threat in some relationships. There is a sort of connection that we have with our babies that sometimes excludes our partners. So that is an area where we find ways to integrate these experiences so that partners don't feel so disconnected from that stage. Just because the babies rely on their mothers, and that is a different type of relationship that the babies will have with their fathers or the partner. The postpartum, of course, we know a whole lot about that. So we truly, once again, focus on psychoeducation. What does it look like to be beyond just the baby blues? So having support, like Shanita was saying, who do I call when the symptoms start to show up? Like, you don't want to show up. You feel disconnected from the baby. You just can't get out of bed, right? So having a support system for that. I like to say planning who's going to help with what. And I think one of you mentioned it earlier, like who's going to be the support person for meals, for taking breaks with the baby, for laundry. I think having people who are readily available for that can be beautiful. But I do know life on this side, it's hard. And a lot of people just don't have a village, right? They just don't have a village. So it's almost hard to recommend that to people who might live in a state where they're by themselves or they have no family close by. So I think forming villages with friends and communities and networks for people who are far away from family, that might be the best way to navigate that. So those are my main points on the couple. But of course, starting with values, clarification, relationship foundation, and doing a lot of the prep work for building a family.
Thank you. And that last point you made about village, that really hit hard for me. Because, we've been talking about transition. So I got married in my 20s, divorced in my 30s. Now I'm a single mom with a young child. And village has been even more important for me. And that reminds me of Naa's group as well. Naa has a group called Single Mom Club. And even those kind of villages, they're so impactful. Somebody who understands what you're going through, you could reach out and speak with them. Even when I'm having a night where I have to make a decision, do I need to go to the ER or not? Just because it's those decisions, yes, they seem simple or something you should be able to do, but you need that support of somebody to guide you through those things or to just affirm what you're thinking. So thank you so much for all of you for mentioning all of those. You have me thinking through my life here. So now where I'm at, 40s, 50s plus. Let's talk about that there. There we're focusing on menopause, transformation, advocacy. And we've touched on all of these already, of course, because they're all intertwined. Shanita, how do you support clients through life transitions even after they've given birth? And what does that look like in practice? So I know you touched on that a little bit, but maybe you can just touch on the part about what does that actually look like in practice for after the birth part.
I would say in practice, it looks like me pulling from what did I observe during the actual labor. Again, so while I'm in that room, I am still with nurse eyes and ears. I'm looking at your blood pressure. I'm looking at what happens when you get the epidural. Let's say if that's the route that you go, and maybe your blood pressure persists at being high. Epidurals have a tendency to cause hypotension. So I am really paying attention to those numbers. And I typically do ask a lot, even in the pregnancy, like, what is that looking like? Especially for my clients who are vulnerable populations who may have a history of hypertension, a strong family history. That's something that I pay a lot of attention to. And just head to toe physical assessment. I like to see my clients within 2 weeks after the delivery because I want to physically look at you. Are you pale? Are you very swollen? Are you having trouble with breastfeeding? Are you telling me you're having a difficult time breathing, shortness of breath, urinary wise, bowel movement wise? So I think through body systems, mental health. We talk about all those kind of things, but postpartum is one of those periods, the postpartum period. It's one of those periods where they send you home, and a lot of times your first visit is at 6 weeks. So I'd really like to see you within the first 2 weeks. I also link my clients with resources such as NJ Family Connect. That is a free service where nurses will come out and they will do home visits, maybe 1 or 2 home visits. So I always suggest that as well, because guess what? I saw you at week 2 and they could come see you at week 3, and then I could come again and see you at week 4, and then you go back to your provider at week 6. So we're covering the immediate postpartum period. And as far as I'm concerned, really the immediate postpartum is the extension of the duration of breastfeeding. Hormones are still off in that period. So for me, I breastfed my children, the longest was 2 years, nothing shorter than 8 months. So with that being said, like throughout that time period, I felt the changes. I didn't feel myself like return to this baseline. And I think just conversations around the fact that there is no return, like Naa said, there is no return. A lot of where we have the angst and the grief is because we're expecting to go back to this woman that no longer exists. And so for me, it's very important to have those conversations with my clients. Also, I have a lot of clients where they're having babies like between the 35. I think my oldest client was maybe turning 43 that year. And so now we're mixing and mingling the fact that we are creations such that we are always on a cycle. So there's always some type of event happening, right? And then we mix in the pregnancy hormones. So then there's those fluctuations. And we have the fluctuations now coming onto the table in that 35 to until menopause, we have perimenopausal fluctuations going on. So we really have to take into consideration and be able to flesh out what those hormonal changes look like. Who can we speak to? Other practitioners that we might need to bring onto the table. I mentioned insulin resistance. And if we get into a point where we're having persistent high hemoglobin A1Cs and things of that nature, maybe it's time to go see an endocrinologist or, the cardiac things that I was talking about, hypertension or breathing issues. Maybe we need to rope in a pulmonologist, just really referring out to these other resources. Sex therapy. So glad to have met you today, Janice, because so many of my clients seeing me are just kind of trying to figure out their way back to this situation where them and their partner are back on the same page because there is that disconnect. There's the physical space of the pregnancy, and then there's the mental and emotional space of the pregnancy. Connecting people with therapists, just making sure. I really like to try to make sure that all bases are covered. I have had the privilege of being invited to first birthday parties. I send my babies gifts. I have really formed some great relationships with my clients who, to this day, their kids could be 2 or 3, and they're sending me a message like, hey, I'm thinking about weaning. Can you help walk me through this process? And I'm really grateful to be able to have built that community with my clients, that they trust me beyond just what they hired me to do. And I'm glad that they feel like I fostered that space for them. So really, I am just a sounding board a lot of times, a friend, somebody that could say, hey, that's relatable. It doesn't just end at, the last visit that we had at 6 weeks. I'm also a postpartum doula. So sometimes that relationship extends to me being in your home, waking up, so you don't have to wake up at night, helping you with your baby, the breastfeeding support. I've done a really deep dive into lactation this year. And so I'm really big on helping in that area and just really being able to fill in gaps and point people in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Shanita, for that. And Janice, Shanita mentioned, about intimacy. So how do you support women navigating those intimacy shifts?
Yeah, so into the 40s, going into the 50s, of course, we're looking at perimenopause, menopause. So this is a stage of life where you have one group of women who are grieving the life they've had before. They're grieving fertility. For some women who haven't had children, this is like the door shutting in your face. So there is a sense of heaviness that comes with this stage of life. And there's another group of women who are finding freedom. Like, I don't have to worry about pregnancies. There's a new, refining and redefining of what sex is. And, we're not in our 20s, so we're thinking about what our bodies are doing. Like, we're truly connected with our pleasure. And we know how to seek that and how to ask for that. So there's a sort of freedom that comes with it. But I think we want to be mindful that there are other women who this might be a different journey for them. Because there is that going through all of the stages of, once again, the ambiguous loss, right? The life that you envisioned, the life you imagined. And for these women, I like to say, we like to focus on community, create a community where they can be recognized for the ways they show up as mothers and the way they show up for other people. And I wish there was a ritual around this, because just like motherhood, like you can see the fruits of your labor. But for the women who show up as godmothers, as family builders, as all the things, we do hope that they can find that sort of recognition and purpose. But yes, the menopause phase, it's beautiful, but it does come with some challenges as we're growing into acceptance of what our body is now, and learning what sex can look like and relationships can look like. Because there are women in that stage of life who are dating. It's different and it can be fun, but there's still some of those things that we want to be mindful of, just like we talked about earlier with, just the principles of sexual health, consent, STDs. We see STDs growing in the older population too. So a lot of these conversations, just because pregnancy is no longer a threat, there are other things that could be out there, right? So a lot of educating around those risks, but also encouraging the fun that you can now have with your body without worrying about some of those things.
Thank you. And you mentioned grief. And now, one of the question I have here for you: how do you help clients find peace or process grief around reproductive choices or outcomes in this stage of their life?
Like Janice said, there are like several different buckets that if you took like the entire population of women in this decade or in this era of their lives, they can fall into several different buckets. And so in my work, mainly the women in their 40s and their 50s, this tends to be a period of reflection, right? A period of reflecting on reproductive journeys, like Janice had mentioned, sometimes with peace. Like if you've done it all, you hit the milestones when you planned and all of that stuff, then there's deep reflection and there's reflection with peace. But often for some, it's with unspoken grief, right? For many, it's a season where certain questions come up, like, did I do enough? Did I wait too long? What do I do with this ache of what didn't happen? Like if you best made plans or best laid plans didn't go according to plan. My role here is basically to help them name and honor these emotions. We talk about grief, not just as sadness, but as love. Grief as it's not just a sadness, but as love with really nowhere to go. You know, it's energy with nowhere to go. Love for pregnancies that didn't happen, love for children that were longed for and didn't come earthside, love for even the version of themselves. This is what Janice was speaking to earlier. The versions that they imagined differently. You know, you probably would have imagined a very different life. You'd be a mother with 3 or 4 children. It didn't quite happen that way. Or you are a mother with 3 or 4 children and that's not what you envisioned. This kind of emotional processing is central to maternal mental health just in general. So when these feelings remain unspoken, it's important to note that when they remain unspoken, they turn into other things. They can become shame, they can become guilt, all of which lead to like emotional fatigue. So in this era, we're working on reclaiming relationship with the body. You both mentioned menopause, perimenopause. This is the space in which it lives. It can feel like betrayal, right? Your body is doing everything and nothing all at the exact same time. So when you have like, if you take all of that, like for someone who has had like a good life, I don't want to say good life, but like everything's gone to plan, like they hit the milestones in the manner in which they did, it's betrayal. So now take that and put it on someone who has spent years of her life trying to control, trying to heal, trying to fix their fertility, like trying to get their bodies to do a thing. And now it's doing this whole other thing, right? So we're learning to listen to our bodies. We're learning to be kind, listen kindly and patiently, and not through the lens of loss, but really through the lens of compassion. The body isn't failing. It is doing what it is designed to do. It's a transition. So it's really just honing in and understanding that this transition deserves, just like every other phase of our lives, it deserves care. It deserves rest. It even deserves reverence because someone had mentioned cycles, you know, like we're just living lives in cycles and we're coming to the tail end of this really big cyclical shift that happens for most of us when we're like 10 or 11. Finally, it's also a stage of reclamation and advocacy. You had mentioned advocacy before. Midlife gives women the permission to redefine essentially what creation means, right? I spoke to our like cultural ideologies around womanhood and fertility. It doesn't always live in the womb. Fertility does not only live in the womb, right? It lives in your creativity. It lives in purpose. It lives in mentorship. It lives in legacy, as Janice was speaking about earlier. There are women who are godmothers. You're not mothers, but they're godmothers. They are family leaders. They're community builders. There's work that is done in reclaiming your voice in medical spaces, because if advocacy was ever important in a woman's life, I mean, it's equally important here. You have to ask for support. Shanita went through a whole bunch of questions that people don't think to ask, but asking for support with hormonal and emotional changes. For you to even be able to know that something is off, you need to be doing these trackings, right? You need to be in touch and in tune with yourself to be able to say, things are changing, like, you know, cervical mucus and all of this stuff, dryness. pleasure shifts during this because there's a lot of biological things happening, and you should be able to bring these things into conversation with the providers who are nurturing or assisting in your nurturing of yourself, and rewrite basically what womanhood looks for you now. So I mean, it's all about finding peace, and midlife isn't just about moving on. It's about integrating like all aspects and variations of your life story. It's about recognizing every chapter from conception for those who are able to closure for those who can, and everything else in between. And to realize that it all holds meaning, and that you're still creating life, just in various different ways.
Thank you so much for all that you've shared with us. I'm really glad somebody out there is getting this holistic approach, this holistic perspective. I sure wish I had it in my 20s or like my teens. I'm knowing what is to come. So I'm really happy that you're making that available to others. And as I continue on my own journey to just know all of what you're sharing as well. So as we close, I would like you to share how listeners can get in touch with you. And just quickly, if you can share with that one encouragement you'd want women to carry with them at any stage.
I'll go first. So you can reach me via my website, which is www.iamchoosingjoy.net. So Instagram, the_RN doula, Facebook, Choosing Joy. And I would say one thing that I would share, womanhood and motherhood look different at different times. There is no right way to do it. There is no wrong way to do it. And my slogan for Choosing Joy is own your journey. Whatever it is that looks like for you, own your journey. I'm not the mom such that I like to be in community with all the other moms and I want to do all these things. I'm the mom that likes to listen to meditation music and lay in my bed. And I have owned that because it was a period where it was like, ugh, I'm an introvert. Am I an introvert? Oh my gosh. Like, and I thought something was wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with me. This is me, except as the ebbs and the flows come and go, and love yourself through it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And these kids are going to find something wrong with what you did anyway. So you need to really, do your best. As long as you can say you did your best, there is nothing else that you can do.
So, of course, I can go. Of course, I can be contacted via website as well. Cognitive Shifts Psychotherapy. I'm in Texas. So I don't know how much help I can do for your community in New York. Also, same Instagram, Cognitive Shifts Therapy or Psychotherapy. I can't remember which one I have as my handle. I think my one message is our relationships also dictates our health. So I think focusing on the quality of your relationships, evaluating that as often as you need to, I think that is the best parting gift I can give. Assessing your relationships and making sure that the relationships that you have, they're quality relationships and they're supportive.
Okay, and I can also be reached by my website. It's www.naapappoelmsw.com. You can send me an email. I'm admin@naapappoe.com. I'm also on Instagram. I have 2 separate handles there. As Clarita mentioned before, I run a single moms support group. So that's on Instagram as I Am Single Mom Supported. That's the Single Moms Club. And I also can be found, the practice is Naa Pappoe LMSW on Instagram. My one parting piece of anything, suggestion, whatever you want to call it, is just lean in, right? Like every stage it comes with its challenges. I love when Shanita said ebb and flow, because it's something that it's a catchphrase I use quite frequently. Lean into the ebbs and the flows. Today is not going to look like tomorrow. Tomorrow's not going to look like yesterday. Lean into it because it is all part of your life journey. It is all part of your life story. And at any moment, you just need to check in to make sure you are at peace. If you find peace in who you are, peace in the space in which you're standing, peace in the life in which you're living, then you're doing something right. No one can take that away from you. So just lean in and just make sure that you're staying true to yourself, like Shanita had also mentioned before, there's no script. Like nobody came out of their mama's womb with a guidebook in their hand. We are doing the best that we can. So if you are able to confidently say, I have done my very best and I am living in my purpose and living in my peace and rolling with the ebbs and flows, then you're winning.
Thank you. And we will be sure to include more information about how to contact any of our guests today in the show notes. So look out for that. And just thank you again and have a good day. Listeners, hope to you join us again for our next episode.
A quick note before we wrap up. The insights and experiences shared by our guests are their own. We love creating space for real conversations about business and growth, and everyone's journey is unique. Therefore, this podcast is for informational and inspirational purposes only. It is not meant to replace legal, financial, or other professional advice. So, we encourage you to take what's useful, do your own due diligence, and build what works best for you.
Thanks for listening to Begin, Build, Blossom Your Business Journey. We hope today's conversation gave you the insights and inspiration you need to move forward on your own path. Don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Do you have feedback? We'd love to hear from you at podcast@cmeaccountingllc.com. Join us again next week for a new episode.